fast, the volume a little bit low. Probably fine. Let's see. What are we going to work on today? Today, we're going to work on storyboards. Let's talk about numbers. Because I like talking about numbers. I already had a side note in this presentation. Which instead of stuffing into a footnote, that's going to go over here in its own topic. Something that I have learned is that I cannot type and talk at the same time. And I wonder if that's a learnable skill. I just want to introduce a couple important words. And I will make a more comprehensive glossary. It's really just a glossary. And honestly, probably included in the descriptions of all of the videos because, as I've been known to rant about, math is one of those topics that uses very precise language. And if I use a word that a viewer doesn't know, that really defeats the whole purpose. If you don't know what I'm talking about, or even if you make a small misalignment due to learning a word from context, sometimes small contextual misalignments can cause big issues. Let's see. Doing some stuff in a different window. Can't see. It's another thing we found is that when you restrict the amount of space people have to write their ideas down, they can be a lot more concise. Typical human will fill however much space they're given. Okay, so what do we need? We need right now we need definitions for the words that we need in order to talk about numbers, because numbers means a specific thing and it's not actually quite what most people think it means. Not that anybody will get mad about common usage of the word, not even mathematics, because it's the common usage and it would be silly. Which does not stop some people on the internet. Okay, so we have digits, and we have. Maybe we should go so far as to make these bullet points. Digits, numerals, numbers. And like I said, this is usually not that important, but I'm about to make. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Having a coffee fit over here. Yeah, I'm about to make a handful of videos concerning what exactly numbers are and what they're for and how they're composed. I may need to actually break this into multiple slides because I'm going to need some pictures or people are going to get tired of it. So broadly speaking, symbols used to represent numbers. The individual symbols are digits. Um, put a bunch of digits together, you get a numeral, the same way that letters make words. And then number, the word number refers to the idea of a number, not the actual written representation of the number. That's the numeral, right? The idea that the numeral represents is a number. Let's see how to phrase that. The idea. Okay, this is why this needs definition is because numbers are an abstract concept. So it's really the idea. I would say more ordered. So quantities is how many. Orderings are, I mean, which order things happen in, but so it's going to be first, second, place. In fact, rather than let's see, duplicate the slide a couple of times, then this first one can become digits. Yeah, congratulations, you're getting insight into my completely all over the place thought style, where I jump from one idea to the next and then jump back to the first one and try to realize things. So, in common use, the ones we're going to see the most are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are common base 10 digits that everybody is used to. Except not everybody is used to it because there are other systems, uh, which will be its own video. Maybe 2 videos, in fact. I'll probably do one explaining how number systems with fixed bases work, and then maybe I'll do a sort of historical video on civilizations that use or in the past have used other systems, because we've seen 12s, we've seen 20s, we've seen 60s. Yeah, Babylonians used 60 different digits. They were they were constructed in a pattern so that it was easy to tell how they related to each other. So each digit was put together from smaller symbols that had individual meaning. But still, had 60 of them, and that meant that most people who wanted to do multiplication, or in particular division, needed to carry around cheat sheets. They needed an answer key because 60, in my opinion, is too many. It's a good number, has lots of divisors, very convenient. Too big for most people to remember a times table that size. It doesn't work. Um, but the Babylonians did pretty well with it. They made a lot of progress. Um, let's see, what do we want to? Let's see. This speaker notes can go up here on the title slide. What do I want to say about the digits? See, this is confusing because in a fixed space system, the digits are also numerals. I don't know. When we teach language, we frequently start with the letters and we build up. But I mean, there are some letters that are also words, right? Primarily A, I, right? So there's the letter A, and then there's the word A, the participle. But all of the digits are also numerals, right? They can each be a full representation. So it might actually actually make more sense to reverse these slides. And start with the numbers. Because the abstract concept is the hardest part to describe in the first place. Messed up the font by copying and pasting like that. Had to look up what heading font is supposed to be, although I'm sure there's a drop down up here somewhere that would do that automatically. Let's acknowledge the common usage here because it's important to acknowledge the common usage. If you don't, then you struggle to communicate. So let's see. something needs to go in here. Preferably an image of some kind, but how do you make an image of an abstract idea, right? The whole the whole problem of trying to find an image to put in there is that once you use an image to represent the idea, that image in itself is a numeral. It's not a it's not the number, it's the numeral, right? The numeral is the representation and the number is the idea. Uh, Maybe we'll go with, right, like like 3 versus what do we have in special characters? Something. Anything with 3 dots. Let's try. So this is analogous to the difference between the word fire and an actual word images of fire. Yeah, that'll do. Right, so we can have the word fire, we can make it bold, we can turn it red, probably even put images of flames in the background. The word fire is not a fire. Right? It represents the idea of fire. Yeah, maybe there might be something in there. We'll get into quantity versus ordering sometime in the future because they actually do behave a little bit differently. Uh, in math circles, quantity is known as cardinality, and ordering is known as ordinality. We really like that word, ordering. Yep, there are minor differences. Like once you get to your third year of earning a math degree, there are minor differences. probably, probably most Most people only care that we represent them with different numerals, right? The first, second, third place are ordinals, right? They're the numerals for ordinal numbers, right? Whereas the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those are the cardinal numbers. They're used to represent quantities. And if you ask me why, I honestly couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I assume historical reasons, because basically everything is due to historical reasons. Hmm. Yeah. I'm a little bit froggy in my throat today. I'll be okay. Probably just allergies, right? Hmm. I'd like to put these in some sort of a box. Freehand, and my freehand can zoom in and drop it right on top of the highlight. It's precise as possible. Transparent. There we go. Doing this just because I want to emphasize those two parts. Also because analogous is a big word and I don't want people to focus on it. Maybe I should make something more common. Okay. So spacing around that special character is strange. That's not right either. Too small. I know. I'm being a little bit obsessive and a little bit of a perfectionist about this. It doesn't really matter because these are only storyboards, and it would really be better if I got other people to look at them and tell me if they make sense before I go through the effort to turn them into actual videos. I may drop the different frames into a video format and do voiceovers just to see how they flow. But those will still be storyboards with voiceovers and not really full-fledged videos. That's probably a good idea. I'll include a link to the docs as well, and I'll open them up for public comments. Yeah. If I suddenly find myself an incredibly popular streamer, then that'll not be feasible. But I don't expect that. That's not what I'm making this series for. Would On the one hand, I want it to get some attention because there's no point in creating educational resources that nobody reads. But that only matters if it's helpful. That's the real goal. The real goal is to be helpful. I also need to practice using less interjections. I am ending up with blank spaces where they would go, but listening to my previous live stream and I say right. Right? I say right. Like I'm asking for confirmation. There's nobody here. And when I don't say right, I say like or hmm. Which are all fine. That's many grammar teachers don't like it, but I consider them a valid part of speech. Both the confirmation seeking part and the I'm thinking about what I want to say next part. And the pause does kind of get uncomfortable if you let it drag out for too long. Right? A little bit uncomfortable. But I've never really done a lot of streaming before. I do lots of video conferences, and I'm comfortable getting up in front of a classroom and doing a lesson. I've certainly done that before. It's kind of a different environment. In some ways, it's the same. I think instead of trying to come up with verbose speaker notes, I'm gonna make a note to freestyle this. Gonna add the. That's really what I need. Is a not too rambling way of discussing the difference between an idea and the representation of an idea, and that's a very deep thought. Like like I've said before, I kind of want to target this series at parents rather than at children. Um, yeah, the difference between an idea and a representation, that's a concept for the parent. The typical child, I think, probably doesn't get that. I'm not sure at what age that level of abstraction becomes reasonable. Because I feel like very young children really do associate the idea very strongly with the representation of the idea. There's kind of a line between where it's pretend and where it's partially not pretend, but if you give children a bunch of images of fire, right, many of them will pretend that the image is actually hot, that it has the properties of of the object that it's depicting. And part of that may be because when we're teaching children language, we do this sort of thing, right? We in books and other media for children, we take the word and we give it the properties of the thing that it represents to make the connection better. Because I think in the case of teaching children to read and write, we're trying to make that connection as strong as possible because it makes it easier to understand that you can have an abstract representation of an object, right? And really young children don't have that, right? That doesn't develop until probably age 2, I would guess. Uh, yeah, infants really only have real or not real, and some of the ingrained rules in an infant brain don't even conform to our concept of reality. Like that's why peekaboo is a thing for really young children, where you hide your face behind a piece of paper or a cloth or a blanket, something like that, and then quickly move it away. And a really young child will laugh at that. It's because they don't have object permanence yet. Their mental representation of the world, the way their brain is designed, uh, doesn't have the concept that you're still there behind the blanket. As far as our psychology researchers and our neuroscience teachers, neuroscience researchers are able to tell, like a newborn and a very young infant, uh, when they can't see you, you don't exist anymore. Or maybe it's not so much that you don't exist at all, but they don't have the connection that you're just behind the towel, the blanket, right? Everything that's not visible to them is equally not there, right? And that's also why some infants get upset and cry when you walk around the room where they can't see you, is because they think you've left, because they can't they can't really tell that you're there. Hmm. That goes away fairly early, though. I mean, you can tell what age a child has acquired the concept of object permanence because they don't enjoy peekaboo anymore. That's like they they one day it will seem very sudden, but that's because our brains develop very quickly when we're that young. Uh, it'll seem like they suddenly realize that you're still there behind the blanket, and the game's not fun anymore because you're not appearing suddenly or unexpectedly. Yeah, but here we're kind of trying to do the reverse. Maybe it's not really the reverse, it's more of a parallel thing. Is ideas that do not have corresponding physical objects, right? I would even go so far as to say numbers do not exist. Numbers numbers are purely a construct of the mind. We use them to represent things in the real world, but numbers themselves are not part of the real world. Yeah, I think that's a promising train of thought. I'll go back and look at the recording of this when I try to put together some speakers notes. This is gonna this is day 2, so that I remember which day's recording I need. Let's look at the recording and condense some of the rambling into concise notes. Yeah, that's really the tricky part. And this is also one of the reasons why it frustrates me so badly that a math is for old white dudes image problem, is because math is probably the it's purely of the mind, right? Mathematics does not exist in the physical world. There's no topic, right, there's no skill you could pursue that has less to do with your physical appearance, right? See if I go saying right again. Sex and gender do not matter. Race, religion, ethnicity do not matter. Your age doesn't matter. There are sayings that math is for young people. It's not really true. It's just that hmm, in some ways, younger mathematicians are more willing to go down rabbit holes that have been written off by everybody else because they have not been exposed to the conventional wisdom yet. So they'll try something that everybody else has abandoned as probably not promising, and every once in a while that'll work out to be a brilliant discovery. But older mathematicians tend to pick hard questions that have remained unsolved and make incremental progress over years and years and years and years, and sticking with it will often really pay off in the end. Sometimes not. Right? Sometimes you can work on a problem your whole life and not make a lot of not make a lot of progress. There are definitely some problems out there that have remained unsolved despite people picking them up as hobbies and working on them for decades and decades. Right? Hundreds of people working across multiple decades each, and some of these problems are still unsolved. There's a chance that some of them are not solvable. that's that's an advanced topic, but yeah, that's in every mathematical system. No matter how well you think you've defined it and how broadly you've set up your axioms and your basic facts, there will always be problems that you cannot solve. That's that's proven. That's the incompleteness theorem by lost his name. I'm gonna look it up real quick because Pretty sure he's been dead for a while, but I feel like he should have credit for that one. Incompleteness. That was Godel. G-O with an umlaut D-E-L. Probably pronouncing his name wrong. Kurt Gödel was German. I've not spoken German in a long time. Gödel. It's Gödel. Yes. He passed away in 1978, at the age of 71. But yeah, that was a big result that you cannot construct a system of mathematics that answers every question. There will always be questions that cannot be answered. It's been proven. It's fundamental, right? And that's what I was saying. It's math is because math is abstract. It doesn't depend on the real world. It doesn't change from place to place or time to time. It doesn't matter who's thinking about it, right? Only the quality of the ideas matter. Maybe I need to do warm-ups before I try and talk for hours and hours. Get back into some singing warm-ups. La 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 la. Sorry about that. I have mosquitoes in my room for some reason. I don't know how they keep getting in. They must be sneaking through the air conditioner somehow. I have not been able to turn the air conditioner off in weeks because I live somewhere where it has been absolutely melting outside for weeks on end. It's very unpleasant. It's background music. Sounds like you're standing next to a skeleton spawner in Minecraft. I don't actually know what it is. Yeah, if you're curious what my background music is, it's just a bunch of random stuff that I pulled out of the YouTube licensed, like free to use library with no attribution requirements, because putting attribution requirements on a live stream is a pain in the butt. I feel like most people don't worry about it too much in live streams, but at least while I'm just starting off, I don't want to develop bad habits. So, if you want to find any particular song, you can go to your YouTube channel's page, and I forget, there's a link in there somewhere where YouTube has a bunch of free to use music that you can use for background music, and some of it requires attribution, either in the comments or on the screen, and some of it does not. And I picked all the ones that don't require live attribution. Thank you to all the people who wrote these ambient background noises without putting stressful licensing stressful licensing terms. Okay. Digits. Digits. That's like this is the numerals slide. So how to explain it? So any written representation of a numeral, or any written representation of a number in a numeral, depending on where you get your definitions from, whether or not a spoken word, like when I say 3, is the spoken 3, is that also a numeral? Right? I'm going to tend towards saying yes, that we we use word to describe both written and spoken, right? We have written words and we have spoken words, but we call both of those words. And going with the numerals are words describing numbers analogy, right? I'm going to say that the spoken representation of a number is just as much a numeral as a written representation. And I think we would all agree that tactile representations should be included as well. For instance, Braille numerals, right? Braille has digits that you can combine together into numerals the same way that you would with, right, a purely visual writing style, right? So that it's, right, like speech or like visual writing. Braille is, I think I would consider Braille a writing system because it is, right, it is a permanently fixed media the same way that writing is. Um, but I would consider it to be tactile rather than visual. And I think those would be included in the definition as well. Um, there are non-speech-like ways to represent numbers as well. A common one is the what's the word? The distances in pitch in music. The, right. There are for instance, the half steps of, right, the various monotonic scales, but that's not even really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about mostly like the harmonic chords are they're a place where math and music really overlap, right? So a perfect doubling of frequency will give you what we call an octave in music, right? That da to da dun, dun, right? I don't have perfect pitch. I can't tell you exactly what frequency those notes were, but I know that the higher pitch was exactly twice the frequency of the lower pitch. Well, probably not exactly. I'm not that good a singer, but right. So there's lots of places in music where numbers come in. I think I would exclude those from the definition of numeral unless you were doing that on purpose, right? So when you're doing it as a coincidence, right? I think that's music. That's math making itself apparent in music. If you were doing it on purpose to communicate the idea, then you could then you could I mean you could consider that language. Sorry, I'm fiddling with the background volume. And of course, the problem is that I have not figured out a way to pipe the background music into my headphones through my stream mixing software. Well, that's not true. I know how to do that. What I haven't been able to do is to get Windows to pipe the audio into the streaming software without also piping it into my headphones. So if I try to listen to the background, I don't hear the background that goes on the video. I hear the combination of the background that goes on the video and the background that's playing from Windows. And a little bit of research suggests that that's because Windows audio mixing system is underdeveloped, that it takes all audio sources and dumps them together into your quote unquote desktop audio. And that if I don't like that, I need to either find or create a plugin for streaming software that uh, plays the music through the streaming software so that that's the only place that Windows sees the source coming from, or I need to switch to a different operating system. Can you tell that I don't usually use Windows, or I'm usually a Linux user? I work as a software engineer, and basically everybody at my company uses Linux. Our work computers, our workstations, our production environments, everything is some flavor or another of Linux. So I bought a new laptop a couple of weeks ago and decided I would give Windows a try because I was thinking of making the series, and a lot of the easily available tools are written for Windows. And I must say I found it very frustrating. I'm not a big fan. I might just be a I might just be an operating system snob. Let's see though. first, the order of the slides. So this is going to have to go over on this slide because I haven't introduced digits yet, and I don't want to use words that I haven't introduced because that defeats the entire purpose of having a quick vocabulary stopover. So here we're going to go something more of a definition. So numerals are, I don't want to say concrete representations to numbers, abstract ideas, like that. 1 section. Not sure. Let's get some more written down and see how it all goes. Three, 4. Yes, I know. I just said that I didn't want to use digit from this slide, which I haven't introduced yet. I think this context is smooth enough that it'll go over without upsetting anybody too much. I don't like that we settled on a grammar style that puts the punctuation inside the parentheses, or actually quotation marks. I really feel like this comma is not attached to the word 3. makes me unhappy. But at least according to my English teachers, the comma should go on the inside. Although possibly not, because this isn't actually a quote, this is more of a do we have a word for this when we use quotes to say that we're talking about the word itself rather than the thing that the word represents? Because that's what we're doing here, both for these right here. Right? I use these quotation marks to designate that I'm talking about the actual symbol 3 and not the number 3 as an abstract idea that we talked about in the previous slide. I don't know what using quotation marks this way is called. Interesting. That's a rabbit hole I don't want to go down to, though, because if I start researching that, I will research that for the rest of the evening instead of actually working on the storyboards that I want to work on. Oh. Hmm. I wonder if I have any special characters that looks alive. Do I have brown? I do. Oh, it has two L's. I was confused for a moment. Does Braille not have an E on the end? It does have an E, but it has two L's first. Uh, yes, I know there are dots. Thank you, Unicode. It would have been more helpful if you told me what each symbol meant, because now I'm going to have to look that up separately. Let's do that real quick. Oh, it has the letters. Oh, here, this one has the numbers. Okay, so 3 is the top two dots. else do we have? Any maybe playing cards? What are symbols on playing cards? The dots on the die are called pips. The die itself is not under the rule. The arrangement of the pips is just like the arrangement of those symbols there. Uh, okay, so on playing cards, they are also pips. I guess I don't really need the quotation marks around the picture of the die. In case you're wondering, die is singular, dice is plural. Yes, I'm a little bit of a pedant. I like strict language. I like it when the words we say have the meanings that we mean them to have. And while I'm all for keeping up with the common trends, because it's important that we're all on the same page, uh, when different words start to blend together, then we lose specificity, we lose clarity, and then we have to make up new words to mean the things that the words we already used to have meant. I lost my train of thought partway through that sentence. Very confusing. Yeah, I'm not going to get mad at people over die versus dice. Just like I don't get mad at people over datum versus data. Yes, there's no such thing as a data point. That's silly. It's called a datum. Datum is singular, data is plural. Right. And that's why people who pronounce it data instead of data have a pretty strong argument, because data is the plural of datum, D-A-T-U-M, and datum doesn't really sound good or make sense based on the way it's spelled. Although I would accept datum as well. You'd get points for using a fancy singular instead of saying data point. If you only have one, then it's a datum. It's fine. Just about the only word that you'll find me actually asking people to correct is when they use the word exponential to mean a lot or many or fast. Uh, because exponential is a real world science word that is very important to understand the actual meaning for a lot of different disciplines. Uh, maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll do a rant video on that sometime. Uh, let's let's see. I'm labeling rants as 100s. Um, case you're curious, the short version is exponential is a growth rate, the same as linear and quadratic, for instance. Not that I think most people use linear or quadratic correctly as growth rates, or even at all. Um, yeah, exponential is not how much of something, it's how fast something is changing. Uh, and the short version is very fast. To make a comparison, a linear growth rate would be uh, if I took a piece of paper and I set it on top of another piece of paper and I set it on top of another piece of paper, and I did that, 50 or 60 times, right? I would have, you know, an inch, couple of centimeters of paper stacked up on my desk. Uh, Exponential is similar, or not even similar, it's the way to describe the growth rate of doubling something. So folding it in half, right? Or if I cut a piece of paper in half and put the one half on top of the other half, right? If I do that more than about 50 times, depending on how thick the paper is, right, you might think, okay, it's doubling every time, so that's obviously faster than stacking them up one at a time, right? Common answers that I get when I pose this to students is, you know, reaches the ceiling or reaches the roof. Uh, the correct answer is reaches the sun. So, uh, yes, exponential is a very fast growth rate. Doubling the thickness of a sheet of paper, 50 to, depends on the paper, but it's usually between 49 and 51 times, I would guess. I calculated it once, got my calipers out, measured the paper that I had. My paper was actually a little bit thin. It took 51 or 52 times. Um, but yeah, the answer is it reaches the sun. That's how fast exponential growth is, and uh, that's why pandemics are so dangerous, right? One of the requirements to become for a disease to become pandemic is that the speed at which it spreads exceeds the speed at which people naturally gain immunity, right? So if you usually for a disease, you don't get two people infected for every one person who's sick. Usually it's depends. Like for a less contagious disease, it could be less than one, right? If you get that number less than one, then eventually the disease dies out, right? That's what we did with smallpox, right? We got everybody immunity to smallpox, everybody that we could get our hands on got the smallpox vaccine, right? And then after we had been doing that for a little while, enough people were immune that the disease couldn't spread anymore, right? The propagation rate, the rate that it spread at, dropped below one. So every I forget what the incubation transmission cycle length for smallpox is because it's not relevant anymore because it has been destroyed. Uh, but every cycle, there would be less and less people that had smallpox. And as there were less and less people, we could focus in on the areas that had not had their immunity rates pushed up high enough, right? And we could focus on just those groups. And as we one by one knocked out the last couple of pockets, eventually there's no one left on Earth that has smallpox. And if nobody has it, then they can't spread it anymore. And now we don't need to get the smallpox vaccine anymore, which is nice because I hear it was actually fairly unpleasant. So thank you for people in the past who all got your smallpox vaccine because now I will never get smallpox, which is nice. And I don't even have to go through the unpleasant vaccination process, which is also nice. Uh, so thank you, past people. You did a good job. I really hope that we can do the same thing for polio, because polio is almost gone. Almost gone. There are just a few places on Earth where you risk catching polio. Um, and they're very isolated places. They're extremely difficult to get to, and uh, transporting the polio vaccine to those places is very expensive. So up until recently, we had been making do with a less effective vaccine. It had more common and worse side effects too. So some of the people in these places don't want to get the vaccine that we had been using because it's got some bad side effects. Um, we do have a good vaccine. It's just transporting it out to some of these places. They're mostly places with lots of mountains, extremely difficult terrain. Basically, the only option for transporting the vaccines, the good vaccines, is to do it by air. So you have to send your doctors and or your medical practitioners out there ahead of time and get everybody to agree to get vaccinated, and then you have to fly the vaccines out. Uh, Incredibly difficult. Uh, but if you're looking for a good charity, right, there are a couple of health organizations that are still working on that. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm sure the internet will tell you if you look it up. Um, yeah, polio is a very unpleasant disease. Causes paralysis in many cases. Um, Super unpleasant. Very dangerous. It would be really nice to completely get rid of it. How did I get on this topic? How did I go from pips on playing cards to growth rates? Because people misuse the word exponential, and that's how diseases grow when their transmission rate minus the immunity rate gets above 1, right? So, take for instance COVID. Right? COVID had, I think, on average, 1.3 people were getting sick, right? 1.3 ish people were getting infected per one person that was sick, which is quite high. And that's why it spread so fast and why so many of the public health campaigns involved not trying to stop the disease but trying to slow down the disease is that if we had taken everybody in the world and put them in a room with one sick person at let's see, let's assume that it was 1.3 people per, then that would be something like, let's see if I can set you up so you can see my calculator. Does the Windows calculator have logarithms? Yes, it does. Okay, let's see if I can share that with you, and I'll show you how you would calculate something like that. Let's see. Sources. Add a source. Add a window. Add an existing window. Uh, Streaming software. That was an odd choice of where to put that. Let's see if I put that. Apologies, I'm new to this. Okay, so Yeah, I suppose. It's valuable to learn this stuff. Okay, let's turn to black. You can see part of the calculator. Nice. Okay, so we start out with one person, and then we multiply that by 1.3 people per cycle, right? So if we were going to do per cycle, then we would exponent that. The problem is that we don't know how many cycles. We know the total people. What we're trying to find out is how many cycles. So instead, we get to use logarithms. And this is a topic that I think most people give up on because exponential math is a little bit confusing. And logarithms are the inverse of the exponential function. So if you don't understand, this is the same way as if you don't understand multiplication, division is going to be very difficult. It's the same way if you don't understand the exponential function, logarithms are going to be very difficult, right? So basically what a logarithm is saying is, well, let's start with what the exponential function is saying, right? If I started with one person and 1.3 people got sick per person that was already sick, right? And I wanted to continue that for, say, 9 cycles, right? I would say start with one person and multiply that by 1.3. And then I would say multiply that by 1.3 by 1.3 by 1.3, do that 9 times, right? So that's 9 cycles. And you would have, apparently, 10 people, right? Whereas if I said start with one person and grow by a factor of 1.3 and do that 50 cycles, and keep in mind that COVID is contagious in, what, 5 days-ish? So 50 cycles is less than a year, right? Now we have 500,000 people. Right, and this is what we were worried about. Right, but the question that I wanted to know the answer to originally was how many cycles does it take to get to roughly 8 billion people, right? So for that, we want to use the inverse function, which is the logarithm, and we would say, okay, the logarithm of uh, that was unintuitive. Where's the clear button? Okay, so we would say logarithm. It doesn't. Why you want me to put the number in first? So 8 billion. That's million. That's billion. Rough estimate for people on Earth available to get sick. There's actually 2 logarithm buttons. This one uses 10 times as, like 10 people get infected per sick person, and this one is a natural log. Don't worry about exactly what the natural log is. It's 1.4-ish, if I recall correctly. I'll double check that because let's see. Nope, I'm sorry. 1.4 is the square root of 2. Uh, Euler's constant, which is the base for the natural logarithm, is 2.7. Which are both wrong, because we want 1.3, so it doesn't actually matter which one I pick here. Right, so the trick is that when you have a logarithm, but it's in the wrong base, right, so yeah, if 10 people got infected per sick person, it would only take 9 cycles, right? That would be the end of civilization. That Right, that would take 9 cycles, and for a virus that takes 5 days to become infectious again, right? That would be a month and a half, and everybody on the planet would be infected within a month and a half. And for a disease that takes a minimum of 2 weeks to recover from, um, yes, most of the people responsible for taking care of sick people would themselves be sick, and the entire hospital system would collapse and everybody would die. Um, so that's why 10 is really bad. Um, but I think 1.3 was more accurate. So the trick to change the base in a logarithm, and I'm not going to do the proof on why this is pick whatever logarithm your calculator has, and then divide that by the logarithm using the same button on the base that you want, right? So I did log base 10 of 8 billion. And if I divide that by log base 10 of 1.3, then I get what is obviously a wrong answer, so I did something wrong. Let's do one that I know the answer to. So if I do 2 to the 5th, oh, I see what happened. I didn't hit equals, so it didn't move that up to interact. Okay, so it was me not knowing how to use this calculator. Divided by 1, 3. So this is the base 10 log of 1.3. But I didn't hit equals to get the actual answer. So it would take 86 cycles. And if we're working with, that takes about 5 days per cycle. And if we do nothing, then everybody on Earth would have caught COVID within the first 365, subtract 365 from that, first 1 year and 69 days, 70 days. Which is why we were trying to slow it down, especially in the middle part. Because what this doesn't cover is that for most viruses, once you've recovered, you have to wait a couple of months before you can catch the same virus again. Depends on the virus. Some of them it's 3 to 6 months. COVID, unfortunately, is one of those. That's why we keep having mutations, is because it doesn't stick around in our immune system doesn't remember it very long. So people can get reinfected, and the more times that people can get reinfected, the more available victims, I guess, hosts the virus has. It has more chances to mutate, which is frustrating. Whereas, what's one that, let's see, measles, right? You get vaccinated for measles as a kid. That one vaccination will last you pretty much your whole life. Your immune system remembers it for a long time. It doesn't mutate rapidly. After polio, measles would be my next target for eradication. It's It's not as dangerous as some of the other available diseases, but it's a relatively easy target. Uh, and I figure, why not get rid of the ones that you can when you can? Problem with measles is ridiculously infectious, much more infectious even than COVID, right? Uh, COVID, if somebody sneezes like in your living room, right, there's active viral particles in the air for about half an hour. Uh, with measles, somebody could sneeze in your upstairs bedroom and your living room will be contaminated for 2 or 3 hours, right? It's very dangerous when you get it into a large population that hasn't been immunized. Uh, like somebody will go into a public space, a restaurant, you know, library, a school, children especially transmit diseases like this, right? Somebody will go into a school classroom, right? They'll go to the gymnasium or the cafeteria, right? One kid with measles sneezes in that cafeteria for the first lunch period. Every single kid in that school is exposed over the next 2 hours because they all go into that same room. That's how infectious measles is, and why getting vaccinated for that one is really important because it's not the most dangerous disease, but it does have some really dangerous side effects. And I know a lot of people, especially those who grew up in, say, the 50s, right? We didn't have a good measles vaccine then. So a lot of them caught the measles and they got through it just fine. And they're under the impression that it's not that dangerous a disease. Right? It's a very dangerous case of selection bias because you know who's not on Facebook telling you that it's not that dangerous? All the people who died, right? Because dead people don't post on Facebook. Sorry, unalive people. It's fine. I don't need to be monetized anyway. This is a topic that really frustrates me. Yes. So, the more contagious a disease is, the more important it is that as many people as possible are immune to it to reduce the rate at which it spreads, right? Because high rates of spreading get you into exponential growth, which means they could spread to the whole planet in just a year or two, which is no good. It's bad. We want growth rates to be less than 1. We want there to be less people with a given disease in every single infection cycle. And that's true for every disease. Um, the catch is that we don't have good vaccinations for every disease. And most of the ones we do have vaccinations for are viral, because viruses are relatively easy to make vaccines for. Um, there are there are things that work the same way as viral vaccines for some bacteria. Not many, a few. Um, some of them, instead of targeting the bacteria themselves, target the whatever dangerous byproduct the bacteria produces. So in some cases, the bacteria itself is not especially dangerous. So this is the case with E. coli. Uh, E. coli is a bacteria that mostly lives in people's intestines and colons. And the way that it spreads is due to poor hand washing. And it gets on surfaces and you pick it up, and it's not great to eat it, but most E. coli is not especially dangerous. The problem is that there is a specific breed of E. coli that produces, I believe it's called Shiga toxin. Named after the researcher who discovered it. He was, I believe, named Shiga. I think he was Japanese. Um, when that breed of E. coli feels threatened, right, you take antibiotics, it starts producing this toxin, right? And basically, if it's already in your intestines and you happen to take some antibiotics, uh, now you have all of these bacteria in your intestines panicking and producing poison inside of you, which is not great. Uh, Let's see, what else does that? I want to say tuberculosis? No. Maybe it was tuberculosis? There are a handful that do that. Tuberculosis does that. Botulism produces a toxin like that. I think maybe it's tuberculosis that we've developed something that's similar to a vaccine, except I don't think it targets the actual. It doesn't feel right. I don't think it is tuberculosis. No, I take it back. It was tuberculosis. Um, Although I think tuberculosis vaccine actually works the same way as a viral vaccine. It accustoms your immune system to what the bacteria looks like. So your immune system attacks the your immune system attacks the bacteria directly. It's tetanus. The tetanus vaccine is not targeting bacteria that produce the tetanus toxoid. It's targeting the actual toxin that is produced. So that's a that's an interesting variation, right? It lets your immune system take care of the bacteria the normal way. Um, but what it does is it preps your immune system to know what the toxin produced by the bacteria looks like. And this is a bacteria that normally harms you versus a toxin via normally harms you via toxin rather than attacking you directly. So if you've taught your immune system how to deal with the poison, then it'll break down the poison, and that'll buy you enough time for your immune system to take out the bacteria on its own. I don't know how many there are, but in general, there are not that many vaccines for bacteria, and for something like if we move up another step to protozoan, there are a handful of extremely gross and dangerous protozoans. Uh, One that destroys your brain, one that destroys your liver and your blood cells, right? And protozoans are pretty big. We don't really have vaccines for those. Um, yeah, protozoans are multicellular. They're significantly larger than bacteria. Bacteria are significantly larger than viruses. It's much more complicated, harder to harder to come up with vaccines. Uh, yeah, in some of those cases, it's well, like if we take malaria. Malaria is the one that I was thinking of. Oh, actually, it turns out that the Plasmodia protozoan is single-celled. It's not multicellular. It is single-cellular. It's not a bacteria though. It's a protozoa. Um, Normally spread through mosquitoes. It would be a lot easier to kill all the mosquitoes, I think, than it would be to develop a than it would be to develop a vaccine for malaria. But I wonder if somebody's working on that. I would guess yes, because a lot of people suffer quite a lot. Oh, World Health Organization does have a malaria vaccine. Um, October 2023. So this is brand new. Looks like it does not completely prevent malaria, but it keeps it from killing most people. Yeah, the numbers make it look like it downgrades people who would have gotten sick to people who don't really get sick, and people who would have died to getting sick. So that's definitely a big benefit. Catch is that we could. Okay, so I'm going to put out a reasonably controversial opinion here. Uh, I don't like mosquitoes. I I think we could probably get rid of, at the very least, all of the mosquitoes that bite people. Uh, we're we're good at driving things extinct, and we're quite efficient when we do it on purpose. We have the technology to kill every mosquito on Earth, but we don't have to actually, because there's something like 30,000 types of mosquitoes, and only about 5 of them bite us. So we really only need to kill all the mosquitoes that bite humans, and probably will kill all the ones that bite, like cows and goats and cats and dogs and things, because there's some overlap there. And if we transmit diseases to our livestock and our pets, there's a higher chances that we're going to catch the diseases. Yeah, I personally suspect that getting rid of the 5 or so species of mosquitoes that bite humans would not have that much of an environmental impact, because there are tens of thousands of other kinds of mosquitoes that can fill that niche. And their niche is basically getting eaten by fish and amphibians and spiders, ray spiders. Can I get some spiders? Because I'm tired of these mosquitoes in my room. Yep. And before you say, seems like it would be really hard to get rid of all the mosquitoes. Uh, we're actually already doing that in a couple of places. Southern California is trying to get rid of all of their mosquitoes. Not everybody's happy about it, but mosquitoes are not endemic to Southern California anyway. So people are just worried that something unforeseen will happen if we start tinkering. Because the current plan that we're using involves genetic engineering mosquitoes, uh, male mosquitoes that don't bite people. Only the female mosquitoes bite people. So we've been genetically engineering male mosquitoes. I think we're using a bacteria to infect them. And what it does is those male mosquitoes' uh, offspring are not healthy, right? So what we do is we breed a whole bunch of these male mosquitoes, and then we sick the bacteria on them that damage their ability to reproduce. And then we basically saturation bomb the area that we want to clear out. And we overwhelm the natural population so that most of the mosquitoes born in the next generation uh, can't reproduce. And then we do that for several years in a row, constantly overwhelming the natural population with the ones that have damaged offspring. until there's not enough population left to recover. Uh, in case you're wondering whether this is a new thing, the answer is no, this is not a new thing. The American screw fly used to do a lot of damage to the cattle industry until we did something similar. Uh, the genetic engineering was not as precise back then, but I mean, turns out you can just X-ray a bunch of them and get similar results. Not quite as fast, and it's not as precise, but it works. Um, yeah, we captured a bunch of screw flies, did basically the same thing, and now there are no screw flies in North America. And we have a section of, I think it's in Nicaragua. We basically have a decontamination zone. Like we have a buffer zone where we're continuing to kill all the screw flies uh, because nobody's put together the money to eradicate all of the screw flies from South America. So we're always at risk that they would spread back up across. Yeah, I think it's in Nicaragua, but we're always at risk that they can spread across the decontamination zone and move back into North America. I do kind of wonder if in the long run it might be less expensive to eradicate screw flies entirely. Um, right? Because we pay quite a lot of money every year to maintain the buffer zone. Um, and I think if we could, come up with cash a couple of years in a row, we could eliminate screw flies from South America as well, and then we wouldn't need to maintain a buffer zone. Because I don't know if screw flies have become endemic anywhere else in the world, but oceans are pretty good at preventing most animals. So that's why sometimes there are noxious beasts of various sorts that live in, say, Asia or Africa or Europe, and they don't normally make it to the United States or Canada or Argentina. It's also why we panic so much when species from those places do come in, usually aboard a cargo ship or an airplane. Um, Florida is currently has a bunch of quarantine zones for giant African snails. And I don't remember exactly what's so bad about them, other than that they're invasive and will eat like all the vegetation in Florida and probably destroy a lot of food crops. They may also carry parasites because lots of snails carry parasites. Um, yeah, they've been introduced to a couple of counties in Florida, and Florida is trying to get rid of them. But they have quarantine zones set up around them so that people are reminded, hey, if you are transporting a boat or a truck or a trailer or something out of these counties, you should check and make sure you don't have any giant African snails hitching a ride. And also, one of the bigger risks is landscaping materials. You cannot use dirt and soil from those counties in landscaping in other places because snail eggs are in the dirt. And if you move the dirt that has snail eggs in it from a county that's infested to a county that is not, soon you will have two counties that are infested. It's not great. Yeah, exponential growth also applies to invasive species. They will grow until they run out of spaces to grow, and if you don't do anything about them and nothing is knocking them down, they have growth rates that are greater than 1. and you lose very quickly if you're not on top of it right away. The thing to keep in mind in the real world, though, is that right, for diseases, there are only so many people that can get sick. And for invasive species, there's only so much food available. Um, and if there is a native species that is willing to become a predator and eat the invasive species, then they will generally not become that invasive because the native species will see its population go up because it now has more food, and that will prevent the foreign species from increasing its population. That's what normally happens, right? That's why native species don't have the same problems, right? Is because, say, a native caterpillar, right, is going about its business, right, turning into some sort of moth or butterfly. Uh, Everywhere in its life cycle, right, there are other things that eat it, right? There are insects that eat the eggs, birds that eat caterpillars and the butterflies. Uh, Lots of amphibians like to eat insects, right? Uh, if they lay their eggs in the soil, then you're going to have moles and voles and mice and all sorts of little digging rodents. They're perfectly happy eating insects and insect eggs, right? So in those cases, right, the, the plant population goes up and then prey animals eat the plants. So the prey animal population goes up and the plant population goes down, and then predator populations eat the prey, and then the predator population goes up, and then the prey animal population goes down. And when the prey population goes down, then the plants recover and the predators fall off because now the predators have less food. But then the plants recover and the prey animal recovers and eats the plants, and then and you get a cycle, and eventually you find something stable. And for a growth rate, right, that would be neither growing nor decaying, right? That would be right. If you're looking at the exponential, because these are mostly exponential processes, right? If you have an exponential process where the base is 1, it doesn't matter how many times you multiply something by 1, the population doesn't change. In real life, it goes up and down, uh, but it goes up and down more or less symmetrically around an average population. Yes, my original point was I'm a pedant and I like precise language, but I mostly only go out of my way to criticize people on words that have actual important meanings, and exponential is one of those words because there's a lot of really, really important stuff that's built off of exponential growth. So I don't want to see that word get diluted to mean big or fast, um, because then we'll need a new word for it. And we already have a good word for it that all of the math and science communities use, and replacing it would be a lot of work for very little gain. So yeah, my back when I was lecturing, right, I would always get my first year was lecturing physics and tutoring in computer science and math. First year students in all of those disciplines would get the exponential lecture, uh, because all of those disciplines need to be able to use the word exponential correctly. I don't know that it's particularly useful for most people. after doing it for a while, I kind of got tired of trying to get people to unlearn the common usage. So you can use all the other words wrong, and I won't say anything unless I notice one that's going to cause trouble in the future. But try and get exponential correct. Exponential is a growth rate. It is not a size, and it is not a speed. Oh well, maybe the precise definition will catch on, and then I will never have to have another group of first year university students who need to relearn something they thought they knew. All right, I am out of water, and I'm hungry, and I'm thirsty, and I'm not making progress on the thing that I was going to work on. So I'm going to call it a bed. And anybody who is watching this, thank you.